we're now joined by Dan Perry. He is a world affairs analyst and he joins us live from Tel Aviv in Israel. Dan, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on this today. Dan, Tommy Robinson has cited the death of Charlie Kirk as one of the reasons for this march. What does this say about transatlantic far-right linkages and worldwide far-right linkages, in fact?
We are seeing the emergence of a new type of transatlantic alliance, far different from the old one. And we're talking here about far-right populist groups that are fundamentally anti-immigrant and whose main axe to grind, essentially, is opposition to the far-left progressive movement. The obsession with gender, the emphasis on identity politics, and a lot of the grievance that the far-right groups are feeling really has to do with the sense that Christianity, white culture as attached to this idea of a Western culture is under threat from various groups. And in the US, it may be more to do with Hispanics. And in Europe, obviously, it's Muslim and African immigrants. None of it is particularly pretty, but these groups have a lot of appeal because of what many people in the center, even the liberal center in both countries, think has been excessive, overreach by the progressive movement, and a sense that people in the West are no longer in touch with their own historical origins and are sort of the only society on earth expected to accept immigrants without limits. These are great exaggerations of the reality, but they do attach to certain problems that have emerged in some of these societies to do with immigration that many people believe is unchecked or has been too much allowed to exist in illegality, but also a real serious societal rift over what it means to be a democracy. And these far-right groups, I sense, are subscribing to the idea, the subversive but also seductive idea that democracy is essentially tyranny of the majority, and once the government is elected, they should be able to do more or less what they want. That is what is driving a lot of the actions of the Trump administration in the U.S. We see manifestations of it elsewhere. Obviously, Erdogan's Turkey and Orban's Hungary. It was the case in Russia that was kind of a vanguard of all this 10, 20 years ago, but of course in Russia it mutated to full dictatorship, and the fears of people in the center in these Western countries are that if this far-right populist movement represented in the UK by Tommy Robinson, but also by others, some would say that Nigel Farage, who's currently leading the polls as part of it as well, that if they should come to power, the result would be tremendous diminution and maybe ultimately destruction of the liberal democracy, which means checks and balances and separation of the different parts of government, judicial, legislative, and executive, and all the other rights and safeguards that constitute democracy. That type of democracy that has brought prosperity to the West might disappear from the earth. This is a toxic divide and a real issue in Western countries. And the Charlie Kirk murder is being used to whip up support for the far right in a manner that I do not think Kirk himself, who was a man of dialogue and of the dialectic, would necessarily want.
Dan, I do apologise for interrupting you. We are currently showing live visuals of the streets of London where thousands and thousands of people are lined up in protest. As you can see there, a sea of Union Jacks and St George's crosses lining the streets of the English capital there. Dan, I want to come back to you as we look at those visuals about how many people are really getting behind this movement. Who exactly is Tommy Robinson, and what does it say about the state of Britain, the state of Europe right now, and what extent do these protests in London reflect a broad wave of far-right populism in Europe and, of course, also in North America as well?
Well, I mean, Robinson is in fact a pseudonym. His real name is this has been almost forgotten. Yancey, I think it is. He is. I mean, his reputation is that of a rabble rouser. But he speaks for a very loud minority in Britain that basically hates immigrants. The immigration issue in the UK and also parts of mainland Europe can be viewed a number of different ways, and these far-right movements, I think, exaggerate the demographic impact of the Muslim immigrants. In the UK, I don't think it's more than 6%. Even in France, the immigrants, if you include the Africans as well, difficult to gauge because France doesn't keep demographic data as much as other countries, but it's no more than 10, 12%. Germany, also less than 10%. So it's not like the Muslims are going to take over Europe anytime soon. But what you do see is many cities where to which the immigrant communities gravitate. And, there has been reporting about, for example, how in public primary and secondary schools in Vienna, immigrants, generally Muslim immigrants, account for over 40% of students. Of course, there are some cities in the UK that now have Muslim mayors. That includes London. There are cities where huge neighborhoods are considered to be off limits to police because of gangs of immigrants running them and criminality and so forth. But I think these communities tend to be congregated, almost ghettoized in certain specific areas where their numbers are inflated. And so that enables, through selective reporting, the agitation of people who fear a societal takeover. The overall numbers don't justify that fear, but the situation in certain cities, for example, the banlieue of Paris, do seem dire to people who want to preserve the original culture. All this attaches to a huge philosophical question about the nature of migration and immigration. The question of indigeneity, who has the right to control the culture of a particular place? Should borders be open? When you accept immigrants, should you try to assimilate them into your own culture? On the other hand, if you're a liberal culture, can you not do that? Can you be liberal with incoming immigrant societies that are illiberal and that, for example, harbor views that you'd consider to be misogynistic in some cases, certainly anti-LGBTQ, anti-gay, and more. So there's real tensions. And the far right in Britain, represented by Tommy Robinson, and certain groups in the U.S.,
Yes.
for sure, are fanning the flames of this. Kirk himself, as I said, was remarkably a man of, he had extreme views for sure, but he wasn't as extreme, for example, as the far more extreme group surrounding a person named Nick Fuentes, who hated Kirk for not hating the gays enough from their perspective. It's hugely complex, this constellation of groups in the far right, and they're all coalescing in the UK around Tommy Robinson's protest today. The numbers look big, but I think they still remain a minority in society at large. But the concern over immigration and national identity being diluted by too many migrants, that's not a tiny minority. It also may not be unjustified. There is a legitimate question whether a country should have its borders be open and should preserve its original culture. Of course, all humanity comes from Africa, so everything is a history of migration and conquest, and there really are no original cultures, but that's for another time.
Yes, Dan, do stay with us. We will, of course, bring you all the updates coming out of that rally in London when we get them.